A good hero needs a good nemesis. Some are dangerous to the point that the protagonist is truly tested, while at the other end of the scale, there are the odd few that are fantastic as antagonists, but are in fact themselves pretty damn useless. Whether this is because their ego quite outmatches their skills and abilities, or in some cases because they are designed to be that way, you don't always have to be a good bad guy to be a great villain. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 great movie villains who were completely useless. Number 10. Yosef Tarasov, John Wick. A good villain has to bring out some emotion from an audience, and hatred isn't a bad one to go for. That's certainly what Yosef Tarasov managed to do throughout John Wick, particularly when he kicked off the entire cinematic franchise by killing the titular character's dog. Daisy was one final gift to John from his wife after she died, and meant everything to him. Of course, Yosef didn't know that at the time, and he didn't know who John Wick was, but regardless of the background behind it, who kills a harmless puppy? Yosef attacked John because he wouldn't sell him his car. He had the kind of cocksure arrogance that can only come with having a powerful father, and absolutely no skills to back it up. When he tried to intimidate Aurelio, he was laughed at to his face, and even his dad knew that his son had no chance against Wick. The kid was too dumb to be scared at first. That arrogance came into play again when he was surrounded by his guards and his dad's money, but he realized the trouble he was in when John actually turned up and put a couple of bullets in him with barely a sweat broken. Number 9. Emperor Palpatine, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. You could argue that there was a lot of old ground retrodden in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The Force Awakens had the same basic plot as A New Hope. Rey's battle with herself was reminiscent of Luke seeing his own face under Vader's helmet, and of course, somehow, Palpatine returned. The Emperor was a fantastic villain throughout the original trilogy, and even the prequels, but no one needed his return in 2019, particularly when it came with so little logic or explanation. Plus, there's the fact that his plan was ridiculous. While dead, Palpatine pulled some strings and built a fleet of Star Destroyers that could have bent the entire galaxy to his will at any point. However, because Star Wars is obsessed with family lineage and heritage, this had to become about his connection to Daisy Ridley's Rey and the retcon that made her his granddaughter. He lured Rey to him and tried to get her to submit to her anger and rage, kill him and rule in his place. Yeah, because when he tried this with Luke all those years earlier, it ended so well for him. They say that doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results is the definition of insanity, and Palpatine is a great example of this. Number 8. Dr. Evil, the Austin Powers Trilogy. With Austin Powers was created the greatest ever spoof of the greatest gentleman spy of all time. And with this parallel between Mr. Bond and Mr. Powers, there had to be a similar connection with the big bad he came up against. Essentially, Dr. Evil was made up of just about every Bond villain cliche you could think of. The cat, the henchmen, most of them useless themselves, the convoluted plans that allowed escape rather than just simply killing the hero and winning. Hell, they even beat Bond to the villainous half-brother reveal. Evil even called certain things out himself. He knew that he was putting Austin Powers into an easily escapable situation, but when his son asked why he didn't just kill him, he told Scott that he just didn't get it. The best part of the whole Austin Powers trilogy is that it never took itself seriously, and Dr. Evil is certainly no different. He couldn't even come up with a proper evil plan, and when he finally did, he struggled to hold the world to ransom properly. Just because Dr. Evil was designed specifically to be this way, to never truly offer any threat to Austin Powers and to let him shine, his place on this list is no less valid. Mike Myers' character is a classic comedy villain in the original film and throughout the trilogy, and was beyond all doubt completely and utterly useless. Number 7. The Traveler, Carry On. Jason Bateman may have made his name playing comedic characters in the likes of Horrible Bosses, Game Night, and Arrested Development, but he showed another side to himself in Ozark, and for 2024's Carry On, he went full villain. Opposite Taron Egerton's TSA agent Ethan Kopech, Bateman's character, known only as the Traveler, attempted to manipulate Ethan into allowing a bomb onto a plane on Christmas Eve. He was incredibly resourceful. He found out everything he could to threaten and blackmail Ethan into complying, and ultimately the bag in question was let through the scanners without incident. However, there was far more to the story than just the bag. This was arguably the biggest obstacle to get through, but the Traveller never had the control over Kopek that he thought he did. Not only did he lose track of his would-be puppet multiple times, he made the grievous error of teaching him how to disarm the bomb himself. In a bid to coerce Ethan into complying, the Traveller armed the bomb and had to talk Edgerton's character into switching it back off. Of course, this came in handy later when he was able to foil the villain's plan just the way he had been taught. Yes, Bateman played a menacing and intimidating villain, but he certainly wasn't as good at this as he thought. Number 6. White Goodman, Dodgeball, a true underdog story. It says it right in the subtitle of the film that Dodgeball was an underdog story. A group of average Joes who had never played the sport attempted to win the annual Dodgeball tournament in Las Vegas in a last-gasp attempt to stop their gym from being turned into a Globo Gym car park. Against all odds, average Joes somehow made it to the final of the tournament and were up against Globo Gym. If Joes won, the gym was saved, but if Globo Gym won, it was no more. It was a true David versus Goliath story. However, Ben Stiller's White Goodman managed to make his situation so much worse than it ever needed to be. Worst case scenario, if Globo Gym lost the final, was that they wouldn't have a new car park. No big deal, right? But he let his ego and his pettiness over Christine Taylor's Kate not being interested in him get in the way. He tried to bribe Peter LaFleur into letting Globo Gym win, and it nearly worked. However, the owner of Average Joe's took the $100,000 bribe and bet it on his team to win, turning it into $5 million. He then took those winnings and brought the majority of Globo Gym's shares, essentially buying White out of his job completely. In one swift move, the insecure Goodman managed to turn his worst case scenario of no new car park into losing his gym altogether. Useless. Number 5. Scar, the Lion King. When you think of Disney villains, there are some truly top-drawer examples that come to mind. The likes of Hades, Maleficent, Ursula, and more are outstanding antagonists. But you could argue that Scar outdoes them all. In The Lion King, Scar was bitterly jealous of his brother's kingdom, and was willing to do anything to make it his. Back in 1994, there were no sympathetic qualities to Scar, no hidden backstory where he was misunderstood. He was a pure evil bad guy, and he was great. However, that's not to say that he was as great as he thought he was. Yes, his plan to kill Mufasa and assume the throne may have worked, but look at what happened once he was king. He ran the Pride Lands into the ground, his subjects were starving, and he didn't seem to care. Not king material at all. Then there's the fact that he went so far as to kill his brother, but kept the prince alive. Sending Simba into exile meant that the door for return to the Pride Lands for the rightful king was never truly shut. So he took the throne, had no idea how to rule, and was the architect for his own downfall in the end. Number 4. Dennis Nedry, Jurassic Park. Though the T-Rex ran rampant on Isla Nublar during the test run of Jurassic Park, killing multiple people, with the Dilophosaurus and Velociraptors adding to the death count themselves, the dinosaurs weren't the villains of the piece. This undoubtedly fell to the human element. John Hammond was, of course, ultimately responsible for everything that happened since he was the mind behind bringing dinosaurs and humans together. However, the majority of the blame for what happened at the original Jurassic Park falls to Dennis Nedry. The man was in charge of all the park's security and computer systems, and was so unhappy in his work that he agreed to a little corporate espionage. He would deliver 15 dinosaur embryos to John Hammond's competition, Lewis Dodgson, for a ludicrous amount of money. Nedry's genius solution to beat security and get to the embryos unmolested? Shutting down every single security system on the island. He got his hands on the prize, sure, but he didn't seem to consider the fact that he set free all of the deadly animals in the park, thus making escape damn near impossible. The Dilophosaurus ultimately got to him when he got lost, but even if he had found his way properly, chances are the raptors or Rexy would have found him instead. Number 3. Harry and Marv, Home Alone. Typically, the antagonist, so to speak, of a Christmas movie will be something like the waning Christmas spirit across the world, or someone racing against the clock to get home for the big day. Then there's Harry and Marv from Home Alone, one of the most popular and iconic holiday hits of all time. After Kevin McAllister's family went to Paris without him, he was left to defend his home against the would-be burglars, the Wet Bandits. Named so because Marv liked to leave the tap running in the houses they stole from as something of a calling card. The two two had potential to be great thieves, but fell way short of living up to it. We all know the story. They tried to rob the McAllisters and were thwarted by Kevin at every turn. However, not to take anything away from Macaulay Culkin's character, but Harry and Marv were two grown adults and should have been able to outsmart the child. If we're being honest, most of Kevin's traps could have been avoided had they just looked where they were walking or been more careful on the stairs. Then there's the fact that they had every opportunity to rob the house, but instead they turned the job into a personal vendetta against an 8-year-old boy. At one point, Kevin left the two of them in the house alone as he zip-wired across to the treehouse. But instead of taking the opportunity to steal everything of value inside, they tried to follow across the wire and got slammed into the side of the house for it. They were their own worst enemy as much as Kevin was, let's be honest. Number 2, Miles Bron, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery. Benoit Blanc is often called the best detective in the world, and as such, Daniel Craig's character has gotten used to being called in for some of the greatest and most difficult cases ever. Just look at what he went through to solve the Knives Out mystery. When Helen Brand asked for his help in solving the murder of her sister, Andy, Blanc had every right to expect an equally difficult case. And it was, for a time. The problem, however, was that Blanc assumed the killer was as smart as Ransom Drysdale had been before him. Edward Norton's Miles Bron was famously a genius, but throughout the movie it became clear that this couldn't have been further from the truth. He paid people to make himself look smart, essentially, and when it came to covering up his murder of Andy, his incompetence and ineptitude only shone through further. On numerous occasions, Blanc dismissed certain things at face value, as they would have been monstrously dumb things to do. But that was Miles Bron all over. Birdie claimed that he was so dumb he was brilliant, but was quickly corrected by Benoit Blanc. He was just dumb. Number 1, The Manson Family, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. With his most recent film, Quentin Tarantino produced a fictional retelling of the murder of Sharon Tate and the Charlie Manson followers in Hollywood. The story may have been very different from real-life events, but the threat of the Manson family was still there. Tarantino, of course, had the advantage of his villains being widely known outside of the confines of the film beforehand, so he automatically had a strong set of antagonists to play with. He also managed to fill the cast list with a number of future superstars in Mikey Madison, Margaret Qualley, Maya Hawke, Austin Butler, and Sydney Sweeney. They were threatening and unnerving. However, when the time came for them to take action, their ineptitude shone through. Their goal was to initially murder Sharon Tate before they found Rick Dalton in their crosshairs as well. Ultimately, two of the family were killed by a very high Cliff Booth and a can of dog food, while the third was taken out by Dalton, who had absolutely no idea what was going on. It should have been relatively easy to best someone as under the influence as Kiff, and an oblivious man on an inflatable chair in a swimming pool. But not for these guys. Useless.